Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. Okay. We'll start in the next 5 minutes. I'm just muting my self, and as I go in the break, we'll start in the next 5 minutes. We start at 12:07. Everybody join in. See you. Okay. Welcome back. I was just getting something sorted. Good morning. Good morning. Good morning. I'm waiting for still people to join in, but we've not reached the required number. Okay. Good morning. Good morning. So our day looks like this, which is that we'll start at 12. 12 to 3 is our first session. Thereafter 3 to 3:40 is our lunch break. Thereafter 3:40 to 5:40. Then 5:40 to 6 is a second break. And 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. is our last session for today. Part A, Part B, and Part C. Aditya will talk about that when we discuss medieval India. So we have to cover, or we have rather covered, the regional kingdoms. We've discovered, we had a very long conversation about them, and we were able to ascertain their names. This is what we did last Sunday when we started. And as you know, today we have class. Tomorrow we have a holiday for Diwali. Happy Diwali to all of you. And we will again meet next Saturday, Sunday properly, when we'll have the proper Saturday and Sunday, proper 15 hours with us. 24 modules cover entire syllabus. Obviously, Shoaib, that is why they are. If it needed more modules, we would have had more modules. Everything will be covered from early modern to independence. Now here, we just have to. Tomorrow is a holiday. I hope you know that. So in Bengal, we had established a person called Siraj-ud-Dawla. Thereafter, in the Carnatic, we had Anwaruddin and Dost Ali. Then in the Hyderabad sector, we had Nizam ul Mulk Asaf Jah. And thereafter, in the Awadh sector, Suja-ud-Dawla. Shreyas, maybe for modern a little bit, but other aspects no. Ancient medieval world history for optional is very different. The level is very different. Suja-ud-Dawla. And for us, Anwaruddin Dost Ali, Nizamul Mulk Asaf Jah, Siraj-ud-Dawla, Suja-ud-Dawla, and add Haidar Ali and Tipu Sultan. They are very important to us today. They are very important to us today. Because today, what we have to cover in its entirety, what we have to cover is, we've already gone through the successor states and the rebel states. We have to now talk about the expansion of British Raj in India. And today's agenda is that we will start with the Carnatic Wars. Then we'll go into Bengal, Sadrullah Khan, thereafter Dost Ali, thereafter Anwaruddin. But there's a controversy over Anwaruddin after Dost Ali. We have Carnatic War, Bengal. Then we'll talk about the Marathas. Then the Mysore sector and the Sikh sector. So basically, today's agenda is to cover all wars, wherein we have discussed the first major thing, which was the Mughal decline. Second was to discuss advent of Europeans, and the third was to discuss regional kingdoms. So last week I basically created the context in which these three areas were covered, which is Mughal decline, the concept of what we call as advent of Europeans, and the what we say as regional kingdoms. The entire Mughal history covered in medieval India, yes, obviously. So we are now going into the aspects related to the 5 wars we have to cover, and we will start with the Carnatic War. Everyone's here, everyone is comfortable. Can we start our discussion, which is the Carnatic Wars? Now, the Carnatic Wars are interesting because they are related to the tussle between the French and the English, and that is why it is called the Anglo-French Wars also. Anglo-French Wars also, because the Carnatic sector had a very interesting intersection, and that intersection is that when you look at peninsular India, the Carnatic sector, which covers this Tamil Nadu coast in that regard, the Carnatic sector itself is a little bit problematic with its capital at Arcot. What is problematic about the Carnatic sector is that the ruler is Dost Ali. Arcot is capital. The ruler is Dost Ali. However, his successor, his presumed successor is Anwaruddin. His presumed successor, and Dost Ali dies with this dying wish that Anwaruddin should be the next Nawab. But it was not fully established. But what is more interesting is that you have Madras and Pondicherry both in this area, wherein you also have, in a way, you have the English and the French in the same zone. So in the Bay of Bengal, in a way, this area becomes explosive because of the proximity of the French and the English in the same area. And the French, when they came in 1664 and by 1700, they were very clear that the French wanted to challenge English domination. French wanted to challenge English domination. They were very clear about that. That they want to challenge English domination in this area, and Carnatic is going to be the theater in which it is going to happen. And it's going to happen because of the fact that both powers want something out of this sector. And generally they are trying to figure it out how they will counteract each other. And this is a very important point you need to understand, that this area becomes a very good candidate for this type of conflict for the simple reason because of the proximity of the English and the French. So now do we understand the geography? The geography which we are talking about. The Madras, the Pondicherry sector, this is Arcot, and this is the whole Carnatic sector in that regard. A very prosperous zone, but an important zone. Are we clear about the geography here? That we have two imperial powers in very close proximity in the same state, and the French vow to challenge English domination in this area. Are we clear with regards to that? Yes. Okay. Now, when we talk about Hanjor is independent, yes. When we talk about, for example, the French and the English, they are in themselves not very, what we call as friendly powers at this point of time. Throughout their history, English and the French, throughout their history, had multiple conflicts. In the way that you have, for example, the 100 Years' War. You have the 30 Years' War. So throughout their existence, they have fought quite a lot. And it's not a story or a relationship of what we call as non-antagonism. 100 Years' War, the Napoleonic Wars later, and every war which had happened previously, there was a major conflict between the English and the French in some way or the other. In some way or the other, the English and the French always were interacting in such a way that they were always on the opposite sides. So when we talk about Anglo-French rivalry, it is not that it is a new rivalry, it's an old rivalry. That political power, that political rivalry which was there in Europe dominated this whole sector. And if that was not enough, they are fighting for commercial and political rivalry and rights. And more than that, the weakness of the Indian units and the fact that a Carnatic was not very strong will be used by the Anglo and the French, and specifically the English and the French, to further their own notions. But the simple, straightforward question is, who will dominate this sector? That is the most important question which they want to answer. That who will have the last say in this area? And if the last say in this area is going to be with the French, then beat or beat the English, they will wrestle it out. So they are very clear about what they want to achieve from this relationship, which is try to find a dominant spot in India. So we have understood two things: Anglo-French rivalry, and we've also understood the second thing, which is this geography in which we are working. So Pondicherry was under a person called Sher Khan Lodi, a local ruler. The sector name is Carnatic sector, which is the Bay of Bengal, specifically the whole Tanjore coast or the Tamil Nadu coast. If the simple point is who will control the trade with Malacca and Bay of Bengal, and English and French both want to challenge each other with regards to that. Can now we move towards the first Carnatic War and the context of it? And we have to again understand, you have to understand another backstory in that regard. So geography, rivalry, two things I've told you. Are these two things clear? Pondicherry used to be under Sher Khan Lodi since 1674, was under the French. 1674 French, and since 1639 the English were at Madras. Okay. Now we are discussing the first Carnatic War. And the simple point is that to understand the first Carnatic War, we don't need to look for the reasons in India, but we have to look for reasons in Europe. In Europe. And the reasons which we are looking for in Europe are very straightforward, which is that in Austria, the king dies. In 1740, the king of Austria dies, and there's a tradition in Europe, which you would be aware of, or if you don't know, there's a tradition in Europe that every ruling dynasty has a say in establishing their own relative or king and queen as the heir to be or to be the next king of that area. So there are not a lot of dynasties in Europe. Dynasty means families. You have the Habsburgian family, which is basically ruling Austria. You have the Romanov family, which is ruling Russia. You have the Bourbons, who are ruling France. And then you have these, what are called the Tudors, the Tudor dynasty, which is basically ruling the English. So the point is that there are not a lot of different dynasties, and there's always a tussle to install their own relative as the king or queen of some other country. Now, in Habsburg, what happens, or when what happens in Austria is the king dies. And yeah, because there was a lot of intermarriages, yes. The king dies, and two different relationships or two different people now claim to the throne. One is the daughter of the king named Maria Theresa, and the other one was a relative of the king. His name's Charles II. Can you tell me what is the fundamental difference between these two people who are claiming to be the next king or queen to be? What is the fundamental difference between these two? Gender, which is one is a man, the other one is a woman. Now, Maria Theresa claimed that her father had enacted a certain decree in 1714, a law in 1714, which said that women could also become the king or become the queen of that nation. And basically, she says that under the 1714 law, I should be the next queen of Austria. However, there's a relatively strong claim which is coming from the other side, saying that the 1714 decree law was illegal, and a woman cannot become the king of Habsburgian Empire, of the Austrian Empire, and therefore, it should be Charles II who should come and become the king. Now, out of the other countries which are there in Europe, which is that one country which allows their women to become the monarchs of their nation? Very good, Britain. So now Britain supports Maria Theresa. That yes, Maria Theresa can become the queen. And on the other hand, the other conservative powers, Catholic powers, such as France, said no, the woman cannot become the queen. Now, if you can see, there is now a conflict which is developing, and there are two camps which will develop in two factions which will develop in Europe, and this is called the War of Succession. Austrian War of Succession, wherein two factions have developed. One claims that Maria Theresa, and that is the British faction, and on the other hand, you have the Charles II faction, which is the French. So you can see that France and Britain are on two different sides of this conflict. And the 7 Years' War, France, Prussia, Spain, and other countries such as Sweden and Genoa argued that Maria Theresa cannot become. On the other hand, the British, the Habsburgian Empire itself, Hanover, Dutch, and Russia and Sardinia argued that women can become. And therefore, now they are fighting. But the point is that the Austrian War of Succession is not happening in India. It is happening in Europe. So for the first Carnatic War between 1740 to 48, there is the what we call as Austrian War of Succession. And between 1746 and 48, this will trigger the first Carnatic War in India. So are we clear about that? What is the main cause? What is the trigger of the first Carnatic War? It will be a war in Europe which will spill over into India. So the first Carnatic War is independent of Indian rivalry. It is basically a European war which manifests itself in the Indian sector. Are we 110% clear about this concept, that what is the connection between First Carnatic War and Austrian War of Succession? And what is the Austrian War of Succession? You don't have to write it in the examination because they will not ask you to explain the Austrian War of Secession. You just have to write the name that it was due to the Austrian War of Secession. If we are clear about this, what is written on this slide, then I will tell you the story of the First Carnatic War. Clear? Okay. Now, understand one very important point. Understand one very, very important point, that in the examination, the cause of the war and the significance of the war matters. The course of the war, how did it happen? Though I have to tell you that it doesn't really matter, because in 150 to 50 words, you can't explain a whole war. So the cause and significance of that war is important. Course is not something which you really need to worry about. But what I want you to do is you just enjoy the story in understanding what was actually unfolding in the Indian subcontinent and how these imperial powers were wrestling power away from each other. That is the most significant and interesting point. That how are they wrestling with each other to take out power away from each other. So now what I'm going to tell you is a story which basically is written in the PPT also. You need to know the basic idea of it, but don't have to learn it by heart, because they can't ask you to write explain the first Carnatic War to us. That is a very factual question, as it is more than that, a non-analytical question. UPSC will not ask you a non-analytical question. They will rather ask you a straightforward heavy question in that sense. So let's understand the first Carnatic War. The first Carnatic War, the story again goes to peninsular India. We are in the Carnatic sector. You have Madras, you have Pondicherry. Now, the Carnatic sector is this. This is the Carnatic sector. Now, who was the governor of the French in India at this point of time? I asked you to remember his name. Very good. It's Dupleix. It's Dupleix, not Francois Martin. Dupleix. Now, Dupleix says to the English that, okay, the Austrian War of Succession is happening. And it is 1746. Dupleix says to the English that yes, the Austrian War of Succession is happening, but there should be no reason that we fight in India, because it is not in the interest of either to fight in India. So rather, let's not fight, let's keep a peaceful relationship, and let us trade as we are trading. Let us trade as we are trading. Let's not allow a European war to spill over and mushroom into India. Let us not fight. Let us not fight. It's a good suggestion, and it's a very sensible suggestion by the French. So, the first suggestion is Dupleix argues, let's not fight in India, and let's remain neutral. However, what the English do is that there were certain ships. There are certain French ships in the Bay of Bengal, and the English will capture it. English sees French ships in Bay of Bengal. In Bay of Bengal. Now, the English are the first aggressor, yes or no? Who is the first aggressor here? The English, because they have done something which Duplex said don't. So what happens is that from Pondicherry and from Mauritius and Pondicherry, in retaliation to this, the French attack Madras and seize it. They basically take Saint Fort George and Mauritius Navy plus Pondicherry Navy, which is both together the French Navy. They will come and seize Madras. They will come and seize Madras. Now, what should have been the reaction of the English to this? What should have been the reaction of of the English to this? The English have lost Madras to the French. What should have been the reaction? A natural reaction in this situation is going to be what? It would be a natural reaction, would be retaliation. It would be retaliation because now it's a proper French and English battle in India because the English did something and the French did something to retaliate against it. So the natural reaction would have been retaliation. However, what the English will do, is that the English will go to Anwaruddin. And they will say to Anwaruddin, the French have seized Madras. You need to restore it back to us. So the English argument was, you are the ruler of this area, so restore it back to us. But who's the first aggressor? First aggressor is the English. So does it really become the English's point to go to Anwaruddin and say that the French took our colony? They are not telling Anwaruddin that they were the first to be aggressive. But you see how the English are playing it out. The English are a private East India Company, or they're a private body. They don't want to fight and spend money on fighting the French. So rather what they do is that they convince the English, or rather convince Anwaruddin to fight for them. This is the same situation which may have happened in your life also, if you have a sibling, which is that your sibling hits you, but when you hit him or her back, they go to your mother saying that he hit me. But they will not say that who did it first. So the English are not saying to Anwaruddin that we were the ones who seized the ships of the French. They're just saying that restore law and order. This is not the way you keep an empire or a state. So they are avoiding fighting the French in India. Now what happens is that Anwaruddin becomes convinced that he should intervene, that it is his empire able to appease Anwaruddin into reaction. And remember, Anwaruddin is not a confirmed, he's not a confirmed Nawab. He was presumed to be the next Nawab, not confirmed. Now, what Anwaruddin will do is will attack the French to take back Madras. Now, this is basically absurd. This is actually absurd, but but it was very simply going to be a one-sided battle because the French defeated Anwaruddin and did not return Madras. So the French have already shown their power in the first excursion, and Anwaruddin, as it is, was not a match for the French when it comes to arms and ammunition. Now, very simply, in a way, in the Indian subcontinent, who won? Who was the Nawab when the actual Nawab is Dost Ali, but he's very, very ill. So Anwaruddin is acting in his name. So, in a way, the French won. In the Indian subcontinent, the French won. East India Company is a private bought company. Why? Why should they seize French government ships in the context of Austrian war? Gokul, that is called nationalism. That is why when Kohli hits 100, you feel proud. That is called nationalism. They represent their nations, and that is why they are fighting over it. It's called assertion of power, assertion of nationalism. So in the Indian subcontinent, this is something which has already been sealed as the French being victorious. However, the French were unlucky. The French were unlucky because when the Austrian War of Succession will end in Europe, what is going to happen is the English faction will win. So the French won in India but lost in Europe. So therefore, the treaty which happens after the Austrian War of Succession is called the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle. It's a place in France. Aix-la-Chapelle, what it does is France, being a losing power, have to hand over Madras back to the English, and they are now back to square one. Faction means side. So now do you see that how the first Carnatic War is a contradiction? In the Indian subcontinent, it is the French who are able to assert their power. But because in the original war, the French lost, the French had to lose Madras also. This is a very important point you need to understand, that the French did win. Duplex did show that how good an administrator he was, and Duplex was also able to show that how good as an military general and strategist he was. But the problem is that because the French army lost in the original war, they had to hand over this sector back to the English. So there's no gain and loss in the First Carnatic War, but the French have already shown their hand. Are we clear about the story of the First Carnatic War? Is it the same EICP persons fighting with France in Europe? No, it's not that. See, Europe is fighting. Europe, there are two different armies fighting, but they have their naval establishments in India also. That is what they fight with. Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle. Right? Okay. But sir, French returned Madras in exchange of Louisburg in North America. Sure. But you really think that giving Madras was something which they wanted? It was because they exchanged colonies in America and in India. But if the French had won the faction in or the Austrian War secession, would they have actually wanted to give England the Madras sector? They were forced. When the English said that you give us Madras, so then the French said that you have to give us something which you have won in the war, and that was in North America. But that part of the story is not relevant right now. It will be relevant in the American Revolution. The point is that the French somehow are forced to give up Madras, which they did not want to. So yes, you get something in return. But if I have three cars which are basically Maruti Suzuki, Tata, and Toyota, and you have two Mercedes. So if I win over your Mercedes, and somehow I am forced to return your Mercedes for my three cars, would I want to give you that Mercedes back for those three cars? Because Madras is that bigger colony, that most important zone in India. So Madras is very, very valuable to the English. The French could have got anything in return, but it will never, ever counterbalance the fact that the French lost something very big to gain something very small. Getting my point? Since British East India Company, Crown win by East India Company to get Madras, since they have, again, Gaurav, try to understand this point. East India Company represents the Crown. So they are fighting in the name of the Crown itself. And if the main country is winning, they will obviously exchange territories. The Crown took interest in making sure that the East India Company got back what it wanted. Main actors here are very straightforward, which is Anwaruddin, French, Duplex, English. That's it. There are other names also. But I will tell you the names, but I don't want you to remember the names. Who is funding the EIC for this war? The shareholders. The court of directors are funding the war because it is important, and certain amount of royal assistance is coming. But the East India Company is fighting this war on its own cost. No, because the area is different. And Maria Theresa will become the queen, yes. You have to remember Anwaruddin. There's no Governor General of East India Company right now. There's no concept of Governor General right now. Governor General, first it will be Governor, then it will become Governor General. But there's no concept of Governor General. It's just company officials and the armies which they are employing vis-a-vis asking the Crown for help. Crown was negotiating for East India Company territory. Why not? Understand one thing. If Tata company loses in Kenya a tender, would it be the loss of the Indian government or not? It's not difficult to understand. It is in the interest of the East India Company to win this. To win this. And it is also in the interest of the crown and the government of Britain, the parliament, that East India Company does not lose India. So it's a nationalistic battle. It's a symbolic war. Understand this point very clearly. They are trying to represent their nations. If they were never connected to the national sentiment, why would they have fought in India only? Understand this point. What is Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle? It's a treaty which happened at Aix-la-Chapelle, and it was done after the Austrian War of Succession, and thereafter it very simply made Maria Theresa the queen, and the British faction or side one, and they exchanged territories which of whatever they had. So the Royal British Army will accompany at this point of time a little bit of a small contingent, but the East India Company had its own army also, an own navy, but they also had some assistance from the Royal British Army. So that is there. Ultimately, Britain wants profit. Yes, that is true. What is the significance of this war? You tell me. What is the significance of this war? France has shown its hand. The things which are happening in Europe are spilling over into India. And the English have started to show that how they will use Indian powers and their myopic vision, which will save them money and but make the French an aggressor. Because now in front of everybody, now the French are an aggressor. But the starting is with the English. But the French show aggression. According to everyone, it is the French who captured Madras. No one else is saying that the French did it in retaliation. What happened to Anwaruddin after the loss? Nothing really. Anwaruddin went back to Arcot and French held on to Madras. So East India Company is like a private company? Yes. It is a private company which uses governmental resources also. It is not funded by the government, but because it represents the British interest in India, it gets assistance from the crown in different matters for sure. So are we clear with regards to the first Carnatic War? Because this is not a complex war. The complex war is coming, which is the second Carnatic War. Are we all on the same page? Okay, so let me read it out to you. The starting of this war is linked to the French saying that there should be no aggression in India. Dupleix advised the English to maintain neutrality. However, the English will seize French ships in southeast coast of India, and that will become the reason for issues. Now, in retaliation of the French ships being seized, a French navy from Mauritius under La Bourdonnaise is going to invade Fort St. George. The names I've not given you in the main story are not important, and he will capture it. English will appeal to Anwaruddin that the French should leave Madras, but the French did not agree once Anwaruddin asked them to do that. And at the Battle of St. Thomas, the Nawab sent an army, but the French also sent a much smaller but efficient army. And the Nawab will be defeated. He will retreat back to Arcot, but Madras will still remain with the French. Now, the end of this war is with the end of the war in Europe, which is the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, under which signatories now said that we will return things back to each other. The Maria Theresa is going to become the queen, and in return of some North American colonies, which the French did not really want, but because they were handing over Madras, they wanted something in return. Simply in the Austrian War, England had an upper hand, and that is why they were able to wrestle out Madras from the French in India from something which is happening in Europe. So this war is not that complex. It's a very straightforward war. I'll give you a summary of all wars together. One, two, three. Three wars are there. Once we covered the kinetic wars together. So can we now transition to the second kinetic war? Significance, you asked me. French superiority has been displaced. Has been displaced. So they have displayed their superiority. Proof of extraordinary skill and diplomacy is also there. But importance of naval power has also been shown. Can we say first sign how old school our army was? Yeah, yeah, obviously. Our in Anwaruddin or any army at this point of time, any power was outdated, was really outdated. They had no real modern weaponry, and they were mostly outdated. Can we transition to second kinetic war? After second kinetic war, I'll give you a breather because it's a long war, and then I'll give you the third kinetic war summary, and then treaties, and then move to Bengal. Okay. Now, the second kinetic war is linked to is linked to not just Indian politics, but it is actually grounded in Indian politics. So here the trigger is the issues in the Indian subcontinent. Issues in the Indian subcontinent. Is it here wrongly mentioned? No. I told you it is 1740 to 48, which is the Austrian War. 46 to 48 is the first Carnatic War. Last 2 years of the overall war. So there's nothing wrong. Now, the second Carnatic War, which starts as soon as the first Carnatic War is over, is a very interesting one because it is linked to internal politics of India. So, in Hyderabad, the Nizam dies. Nizamul Mulk Asaf Jah dies. Dates don't matter. I'll tell you why later. Nizamul Mulk Asaf Jah dies. And there are two people who are claiming to his throne. One is called Nasir Jang, and the other one is called Muzaffar Jang. Now, in Carnatic, Dost Ali finally dies, and whilst it was presumed that Anwaruddin was going to become the next Nawab, there's a challenge which comes from a person called Chand Sahib. A person called Chand Sahib. Now, there's a civil war situation in Hyderabad and Carnatic. And the European powers can see something that if they do not intervene in these wars, they may lose out against each other. So, for example, Anwaruddin from the beginning was English oriented. So now what happens is that Muzaffar Jang and Chand Sahib get French support in this war. The French say that we recognize Chand Sahib and Muzaffar Jang as the next king of these areas. And in response to that, Nasir Jang and Anwaruddin get assistance from the British. So you can see that not within 1 year of the First Carnatic War, the European powers are involved in the power politics of India. Are involved in the power politics of India. They are playing god or king makers in making sure that who comes to power. And as it is, if the French and the English support somebody and that person comes to power, they will have a pro anti or French, or whatever we call anti French pro English, or pro English anti French, or pro French anti English understanding. So it's about favorable political support for either, for either just, yes, making them puppet rulers. So at the French, if they say that you should do this, they will do it. And if the English say do this, they will do it. So the European powers, you can see, have got involved very quickly into the messy politics of India. And as it is, these rulers don't understand that the support which the French and the English are giving are not for free. It's obviously not for free. It has a purpose and they have their own interests. So what you can see here is that English, Nasir Jang, Anwaruddin are now fighting with the French, Chand Sahib and Muzaffar Jang. Do we understand this internal politics? Yes, in a way they've shown the Achilles heel to Europe. Yes. Are we clear about this power politics? Come on. Yes. Now let's talk about the Second Carnatic War. See, what happens is that in the first initial 1 year itself, the French, Chand Sahib and Muzaffar Jang, dominate and kill their rivals. So basically, Chand Sahib is able to kill Anwaruddin and Muzaffar Jang is able to kill Nasir Jang. So here again, you can see that the English in the first go itself have seen setbacks because the rulers backed by them have been defeated by the French coalition. Now, what happens is that Chand Sahib kills Anwaruddin, but Anwaruddin has a son. His name is Muhammad Ali. Now tell me one thing. Muhammad Ali, if he is still alive, does Chand Sahib have any proper control over Carnatic until and unless Muhammad Ali is alive? No, because there's one son who wants to avenge his father. So what is going to happen is that Muhammad Ali at this point of time was sitting in a area which is today called Trichiri and Tiruchirappalli sector, and there used to be a fort, the Trinopoli Trichinopoly. One second. Trichinopoly fort. He was sitting in the Trichinopoly fort. So now, what French plus Chand Sahib, they go after the Trichinopoly fort to go after Muhammad Ali. To go after Muhammad Ali, who is getting assistance from the British also. And now the French and Chand Sahib get stuck a little bit because it is a little bit hard to besiege the Trichinopoly fort. Meanwhile, in Hyderabad, Nasir Jung is killed and Muzaffar Jung is installed as ruler. And by doing that, Muzaffar Jung will give multiple concessions to the French. For example, the northern Sirkars, that whole sector where we have the Eastern Ghats, northern Sirkars, was given to the French. Over and above that, the French were now going to sit in the court of Hyderabad. They were also given Mosli-Patnam and Pondicherry fully, no rent will be paid. So what the French wanted, they got it. But what happens is that Muzaffar Jung, because of his own illness, and basically because there was too much internal politics, he will get killed, and a person called Salabat Khan will be installed by French. Now, at this point of time, who is winning the war? At this point of time, who is winning the war? At this point of time, French have an upper hand and they have all the main positions under their control. But this was going to change very quickly because the English will very quickly take a call and send an army, or rather a navy general, the bastard of India, which is Robert Clive. Robert Clive will be sent to India by British East India Company to figure out and win this war. And what Robert Clive will do is, he saw that the French and Chand Sahib together cannot be defeated, but alone Chand Sahib can be defeated. So, in order to distract the French and Chand Sahib, rather than going and helping Muhammad Ali, he laid siege on Arcot. So Robert Clive said that if we can't control Chand Sahib, we'll capture Arcot itself, the capital. And what happens is that Chand Sahib quickly moves to secure Arcot without French contingent, and herein the tide will turn. British defeated Chan Sahib and killed him, and Muhammad Ali is liberated from Trichinopoli, and he is installed as Carnatic Nawab. And what the English will do is, after this, English will go after Salabat Khan, kill him, and defeat the French and win this war, and they will sign what is called the Treaty of Pondicherry. This is a Maxwell type of inning, that wherein you thought everything was lost, Clive came in and turned the tide fully. Clive came in and turned the tide fully. And the turning point is Siege of Arcot. It's not confusing, Lakshmi. It's very straightforward. It is two factions being there: English Nasir Jang Anwaruddin, French Chan Sahib Muzaffar Jang. The first Clive is not Governor General. Shilpa come out of it Governor General only after they get Bengal. They don't have Bengal. He's just a general. The point is that English and French are siding with different sides, and the French sides wins the first whole sector, and the first 2 years. Muhammad Ali is under siege from the joint forces, and the English don't have an answer to what is happening in Hyderabad or in Carnatic, where Muzaffar Jang was brought in. Muzaffar Jang will die because of standard reasons, and then he will be replaced by Salabat Khan. At this point of time, when is there the siege of Trinochopoli fort and Salabat Khan sitting in Hyderabad, the French were literally winning. However, the fact is Robert Clive, who was basically being sent to Bengal, he was not fully or directly involved in the first Carnatic War, but he was involved with the East India Company. He was being sent to the Bengal sector. He's redirected to the Carnatic sector. And in the Carnatic sector, as soon as he will come, he will change the tactic. He knew that the power of Chan Sahib is actually not that big. The strength of Chan Sahib is the French. So basically, they are attacking. French and Chan Sahib are attacking Agra, leaving Delhi open. Robert Clive, rather than fighting them at Agra, he very quickly moves to take Delhi, which is, rather than fighting them at Tiruchirappalli fort, he moves to Arcot. In haste, Chan Sahib, against the wishes of the French, moves to Arcot to capture the capital or secure the capital. It is here that the English will kill Chan Sahib, install Muhammad Ali, and now the French will start to lose one after the other. And that is why after this war, Duplex was recalled back. Duplex was called recalled back because they were saying that how is that a war which was already won has now been defeated? That we had Hyderabad also, where you lost Salabat Khan, and we had Carnatic sector also, and basically the French, which were on the front foot, very quickly became on the back foot, because till the siege of Trinochopoli fort they were in the driver's seat, but as soon as siege of Arcot happens, the turning point happens and the English turn the tide of the war itself. So, what is the fact which is you are not understanding? There are multiple actors, but there are two sides: the French side and the English side. English side is dominated by Clive after siege of Arcot. They all are after Muhammad Ali, sitting in Trichinopoly. Arcot was open. Chan Sahib did not care about actually securing Arcot, which is the capital of the Carnatic sector. English distracted, separated the French and Chan Sahib, and defeated both separately. That is the basic point. Are we clear? See, I will read this out from the PPT. I'll give you some time to process it in a break, and then we can take the story forward. See, the Second Carnatic War. I'll tell you what is the Treaty of Pondicherry once I will complete the story. Nothing, all of them give their territories back, and the English and the French, in the joke of the century, say that they will never meddle into internal politics, and they're again back to square one. Civil war in Hyderabad and Carnatic on the issue of succession. Interfering in local dynastic dispute is where the Second Carnatic War starts. In Carnatic, Chand Sahib and Anwaruddin were fighting. In Hyderabad, Muzaffar Jang and Nasir Jang were fighting. Now, if you look at it, there are two factions: Nasir Jang, Muzaffar Jang, English and French. On the other hand, you have Anwaruddin and Chand Sahib, English and French. Now, in the initial, what we call as opening moves, Muzaffar Jang, Chand Sahib and French defeat and kill Anwaruddin at the Battle of Ambur. Chand Sahib was appointed as the Nawab, and Muhammad Ali, the son of Anwaruddin, fled to Trinchapoli. French and Chand Sahib now surrounded Trinopoli fort, but that is going to take time to besiege. Nasir Jang will lose his life in 1750. Once Nasir Jang will be killed, Muzaffar Jang will be installed. Dupleix will be given a lot of power. He will be made the governor of the Mughal territories or the Subedar south of River Krishna. Pondicherry, Mostlypatnam given to the French. French will also acquire the northern Sirkars from the new Nizam Muzaffar Jang. Now, the French, after acquiring this, also stationed a person called the Busi in the Nawab's court. However, Muzaffar Jang will be killed in internal politics and that factional politics of the court, and a person called Salabat Jang will be brought in by the French as his replacement. But the French were really the power puppet they needed, that's it. However, the change in momentum will happen with the siege of Arcot in 51, when Clive will suddenly raid Arcot and divert the pressure away from Trinopoli. Chand Sahib had to return to Arcot. Trinopoli was relieved of the siege by the combined army of Mysore, Tanjore, Maratha, and Clive. And this is the interesting aspect which I will tell you when I will be teaching you Mysore and the Marathas. That somehow Clive was able to convince Tanjore state, Marathas, and Mysore that a powerful Chand Sahib makes no sense and therefore remove him. And Chand Sahib will be executed at the Isle of Srirangam. Muhammad Ali will be installed as the Nawab of Carnatic. Thereafter, they will take away power from Hyderabad also, and they will sign what is called the Treaty of Pondicherry after Dupleix had been, in a way, uh, recalled back or replaced by a person called Robert Goodhue. And true to his name, Goodhue actually was not able to get any favorable treaty provisions towards the French. Treaty was between France and Britain. Company promised not to interfere in Indian rulers' matters, which is again a joke. Both the parties returned the conquered territories back to each other. Busi, who was still stationed at Hyderabad, was now not just going to represent the French, but British and French both. So did not want to change him because he was doing a good job. So the Second Carnatic War ends with everybody going back to square one, but showing that if it comes to the English, they can actually win a war very quickly. So are we clear with regards to what is actually happening and what is the politics here? Is the Second Carnatic War clear? If it is, I'll give you a break and then we can take the story forward. Yes. Okay. So we come back at what? 116. We can come back at 130 and take the story forward and do Carnatic's third Carnatic War. Why did the French lose? And then talk about Bengal. English ultimately won the second Carnatic War. Okay. You can expect a prelims question for, I'll tell you, chronological sequence they can ask you. For that, I have to basically cover all the wars. Then I will actually tell you, see, you have to remember cause and significance. I will give you a trick to remember all wars together. For that, we have to cover all wars, and I will tell you that trick on Monday, on next Saturday. And thereafter, I will also tell you the trick to learn these treaties. I'll give you 3 summaries. Every summary will give you basic points. The story really doesn't matter. It's the cause and the significance. That's it. Are we clear with regards to this? Yes? Okay, perfect. So you had 133. Okay, welcome back. All good? All refreshed? Yes? Okay. So now we go to the third Carnatic War. Third Carnatic War, the context is the French frustration. We already know that the First Carnatic War was won but lost because of Europe. Second Carnatic War was won by the English fair and square. Now comes the aspect related to the Third Carnatic War. Now, the Third Carnatic War is again linked to European politics. Wherein between 1748 and 1756, Maria Theresa ruled. However, in 1756, Maria Theresa died. And that will trigger now another whole round of 7 years of battle for who will be the next successor. And that war is called the 7 Years' War. Again, a war in Europe over the same issue. Austrian War succession, same issue. 7 Years' War, same issue. It's the exact same issue. Nothing new, same issue. Now, very simply, 7 Years' War, again had somehow the British and the French on different sides. And this time the French wanted to avenge the Second Carnatic War. They were frustrated by how the English were expanding in India. And what will happen is that as soon as the 7 Years' War is going to start, first thing which the French will do is the French will capture three important zones in aggression. First aggression is going to be on the heart of the French. The French will capture three very important zones, which is Vishakhapatnam, which is Vizagapattnam, it was called, or Vizingaram, which is the old name of Vishakhapatnam, Mauslipatnam, and again Madras. So basically, the French had captured Vishakhapatnam, Mauslipatnam, and Madras together. And here the replacement of Duplex is a person called Arthur de Lally. De Lally very quickly took this sector, but had not taken the permission of the French crown. And what happens is that now when the English start to retaliate, Arthur de Lally is still able to hold on to Vishakhapatnam, to some extent to Mauslipatnam, but Madras they are not able to. Because there was no reinforcement coming from the French. And this is see how a private company and a public company operates. The need of the hour was that the French crown would send a reinforcement to Lally, and Lally could then hold on to Madras, Mauslipatnam, Vishakhapatnam together. And the English, when they started to retaliate, the Lally was not able to actually do that. There was a very major delay in decision that do they really want to hold on to Madras, or do they want to fight this war or not? And what will happen is that the English will then liberate Madras, liberate Moslipatnam, and liberate Vishakhapatnam. But now the English wanted a solution for the French in India, and the solution for the French in India was very straightforward. Now they will go after Pondicherry. They will go after Pondicherry, and they will besiege Pondicherry. And the final battle, which was fought between the French and the English in India, was called the Battle of Vandewash. Battle of Vandewash. England and France are going to fight, and France is going to win very, and France is going to lose very badly to the English. The English will take Pondicherry. They will take all other settlements of the French, and at the same point of time, Arthur de Lally will be arrested, in a way taken as a prisoner of war to London, and the French establishments are now under the control of the English. However, this war is not going to end in India because it concluded in India. When the 7 Years' War ended in Europe, the Treaty of Paris was signed. And the Treaty of Paris, what happens is, the English say that the French can only now protect their settlements. We are going to give the French Pondicherry, Mahe, Karikal, and Yenam back. Every other settlement other than this will not be handed over to the French. And these areas, the English only allow the French to protect them, not to expand. And after the Third Carnatic War, the French ceased to be a threat for the British in India. After this, it sealed the fate of the French, that the French would never, ever, ever control India. So, very simply, Third Carnatic War is linked to the 7 Years' War, 56-63. And again, they were fighting over the issue of who will come to power in Austria. And again, they were on opposite sides. This time, Arthur de Lally will capture St. David, Fort St. David, and Viziagram in 1758, which is basically Vishakhapatnam and the Fort St. David. Lally did not get the right support, wherein Madras was also taken by him, but naval support was not given by the crown. Too many delays in sending any messages. And the English now started to become offensive and defeated the French forces in Moslipatnam and started to now take back their territories. The Battle of Vandewash, which was fought in 1760, in which the General Coute, the English totally routed the French army under Arthur de Lally. Then once Lally was fighting to defend Pondicherry, he will be defeated in that. And the French will lose Pondicherry, Gingi, which is again close to it, Mahe. And in the Battle of Vandewash, Lally will be taken as the prisoner of war and taken to London. Now, why was that Lally lost? Lally lost because he was not a very good general. This is where the French actually were too quick to take back Dupleix. Dupleix knew how to counter forces or counteract in India. However, Lally did not know that. As it is, Lally used to demoralize his own army too much because he used to see them as very subordinate, very low position. So the French were dumb also to remove Bussy from Hyderabad court, which strengthened the English presence. And the fact is, the French also are not able to protect or actually hold on to the northern Sirkars. So the Third Carnatic War, what we see is that the French crown did multiple mistakes in operating their East India Company, wherein they delayed a lot of the decisions. They were lazy and very slow, very slow to respond. And if that was not enough, they took wrong decisions, such as recalling duplex and holding not on to northern Sirkars, and generally their lack of interest in colonialism in India. Now, the million-dollar question is that the fundamental question is, why are we discussing the Carnatic sector? And the reason for that is that the Carnatic sector ends the French onslaught in India. It proves that a private body can win over a public one, and the French were never too keen or were not taking the right decisions to live up to their name in India. So when we talk about the question that why did the French get defeated basically in the second and the third Carnatic War, one after the other, it's because of the nature of the company itself, wherein sir, both of them will come together in first. What do you mean by that, Aditya? Rephrase your answer. So the French East India Company was a state undertaking. Therefore, the directors were appointed by the crown. They were very lethargic, and a lot of bureaucratic control was there over the company. English East India Company was a private entity. More than that, they failed to understand the complexity of Indian politics. Yes, 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 Aditya. First World War, they will come together, obviously. Because in world history, there are no permanent enemies and permanent allies. And the fact is, hands down, the British were a much stronger naval power also. So you have to argue that it is a dependency on its government and the structure of the company which made a major difference between lethargy's slowness to not be efficient. So the problem here is what I'll do is I'll give you two questions to show you what type of questions can come, and then I will give you the summary of the Carnatic Wars itself. Acceptable? Acceptable. In European wars, we in European is European decide after war who became next king of the any dynasty. No, if there is consensus in Europe, which is rare, there would be an easy transition. If there's no consensus, they fight. Okay. Battle and war difference would be scale. Battles are small, wars is big. Sakshi, I'll give you the summary of all three. Don't worry. Okay. Now, let's try to understand the Carnatic Wars. First, you see what type of question can be asked. Practice question. One would be the genesis of the first and third Carnatic War did not lay in Indian politics. Comment. What is this question asking about? What is this question asking about? Very good. It's asking about the causes of the first and the third Carnatic War. And both are not in India but in European politics, which is Austrian War succession and 7 Years' War. And second type of question would be the nature of the East India companies of the French and the British. The nature of the East India companies of the French and the British decided the outcomes of the Carnatic wars. Do you agree? Are you capable of writing these type of questions? You do not have to worry about the stories. You just have to understand the nature and significance. Difference between the two companies' way of operation. One is private, very quick bodies. Clive had a lot of discretionary power. On the other hand, Duplex did not have discretionary power. Delali did not have discretionary power. Third Carnatic War, throughout that period, and mostly second part of Second Carnatic War, the Crown had no clue what was happening in India. They were very slow to respond in a lot of things. They could have easily done away with this structure by giving the governors in France, governors in India, more power. So the first question talks about causes. The second question, you have to discuss how the British dominated the French in India, because they're a private body rather than a public. They're a private body rather than a public body, and you have to explain the difference between a private and a public, and the advantages of being a private body. Getting the question now? Okay. Okay. Now, let me give you a summary of these wars. The summary of these wars is very straightforward, which is First Carnatic War, English capture French ships, France captures Madras. French governor name is Delali. Is Delali? Yes, Arthur Delali. Thereafter, third English go to Anwaruddin. Fourth, Anwaruddin attacks French. French win. Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle. So the treaty trick is very straightforward. Aix-Popa. Aix, Pondicherry, and Paris. So remember it like this. And under the Treaty of Aix-la-Chapelle, Madras given back to English. All status quo in India. Cause Austrian War of Succession. Aix-Popa is the acronym to learn the three treaties. Are we clear with regards to First Carnatic War? Anybody has any issue in First Carnatic War? Okay. Second Carnatic War. Why the name Aix-la-Chapelle? It happened in a place called Aix-la-Chapelle. Muzaffar versus Nasir. Chand versus Anwaruddin. French. English. French plus Chand plus Muzaffar. Win over English faction. Anwaruddin and Nasir killed. Muhammad Ali in Chinapoli. Siege of Trichinopoli. Clive comes. India. Siege of Erkut. Chand Sahib killed. And Salabat Jung killed. English win. Treaty of Pondicherry, in which everyone gives territory back. Duplex all back. I'm writing it in a very straightforward manner. Are we clear with regards to these 11 points? No big words, no long sentences, just to create a certain sequence in your mind. Are we clear with regards to the complex war called the Second Carnatic War? Yes? Okay. Duplex is from the side of the French. Name itself is very Frenchish. Okay. Now, first war summary is this, Avani. Second war is this. Now let's talk about third war. Here, Seven-Years War starts in Europe. French capture Machilipatnam, Vishakhapatnam, Madras. No military assistance to French due to delay. Salabat Jung was the ruler of Hyderabad. Yes. He was established after Muzaffar Jung. I don't care when he died. In our story, he died in a way symbolically telling us that the French power has gone. I know he will be there till 1763. but we are trying to, in a summary, you keep it simple. I have not told you about Salabat Jung in the main story. But here I'm saying Salabat Jung killed so as to show you that the French totally lost. No military assistance to French due to delay. Four, English fight back. Five, the English and French fight. Battle of Vandiwash. And thereafter, sixth, you have Pondicherry and other French settlements seized. France loses in 7 years war also. Treaty of Paris. Pondicherry, Yanam, Karikal, Mahe returned but cannot expand, only protect these areas. So become a protectorate in a way. So this is the third Carnatic War. Now, when we talk about the significance, first significance, French ceased to be a threat for English in India. Second, the French, due to public government East India Company, lost out in Indian trade. English showed their dominance, and internal politics could be used to break Indian states. Are we clear with regards to the significance also? So with ever increasing power, upper handedness Gundis got after Carnatic, British could have crushed and Kokti and occupied their vital post. How did French exist? See, Gokul, the first point is that in a way all of them are imperial powers. And the British did not mind the French just trading in this sector. As it is, taking Pondicherry and all would not have given anything strategic to the British because they were in the same sector already, Madras. You don't have to remember Battle of Adyar or Ambur in no Adyar is it's called Adyar and Ambur both. Ambur is the first one, Adyar is the second one. So that's a separate issue altogether. So in the first battle, which is Saint Thom, is also called the Battle of Adyar, and the Ambur one is the later one. So try to understand this point. The British don't gain anything, and the French, that is why, will silently remain even after the British left in 1947, and they will leave in 1962, when what we'll discuss in post-independence. Now, very simply, I want you to consolidate this section. Does anybody have any issue in this? Anybody have any issue in this? Okay. So, yes, I know I was on mute. I know. The management had called for some reason about the class. Okay. uh, Studio manager. Four basic significances. French, due to public and government East India Company, lost to the British. Second, basically, French are now not going to be a problem for the British in India. And more than that, the English could see that if they play out the internal politics of India, this recipe would be the recipe for disaster, which you will see throughout the day. I will keep on telling you different areas, and you will realize that okay, everywhere this recipe is there, which is that be it internal politics, be it dominance, they will just play out the internal politics and they will actually get access to India very clearly. So the 7 Years' War, Austrian War, Secession were just in a way the Austrian War playing out in two different periods. But the point which you need to understand here is that somehow, the French, the English, this was the Carnatic sector became the first aggressive point. But the English could notice two things. Firstly, they removed the French totally, which the Portuguese and the Dutch were not able to do vis-a-vis the English. But more than that, they were very significantly linked to the story that the English could see that the Indian politics could be played out in a certain way. So please understand this point. Please understand this point, which is the fact that the French will not now be a problem to anyone. Are we clear? I've already given a lot of time. I've already given a lot of time because I want to give you a breather, 5 minutes, not more, because I want you to concentrate for the last 50 minutes on Bengal. That's a very, very important story which we need to understand before we take our lunch break. So, are we clear with regards to the significance and the first, second, third Carnatic War, their treaties, and everything else? You have to be more vocal, you have to be more clear. Come on. Yes? Okay. So we take a breather here, only 5 minutes. Game changers English. If Clive, you will see Clive will be very important in Bengal also. We take a breather here because I know it is heavy. That is why I'm keeping gaps in between the wars because now Carnatic is done. I want to go to Bengal, which is very significant. Plasi, Buxar, and what happened? Qasim, Jafar, and Sirajuddaulah. And then we'll take a break, come back and discuss the biggest two, Mysore and Maratha. So the keyword is IPOPA, AI for X, and then Po for Pondicherry, Pa for Paris. So we now return back at 2:15. It's what 7, it's what 8. Yeah, I give you 2 minutes extra, but we come back at 2:15. 45 minutes, I want 100% attention. Can I expect that from you? Can I expect that from you? I've been considerate. I'm giving you more time to internalize things which we are doing. Yes? Okay. 2:15, we take the story forward. This is an exception class. You will not always get so many breaks, but I'm trying to create a gap between these words. Okay. See you at 2:15. Okay, welcome back. Every war has this type of table in the end. If you want to if you want to basically revise, you can use this something like this. Okay. Now we go for conquest of Bengal. Now we can we start, everyone? Come on. I'm giving you these breaks to refresh you. I hope you don't start to become complacent more than being refreshed. Now, we know that in 1651, Bengal came to the British via that 3000 rupees clause. We also know that in 1717, again that 3000 rupees clause was rupiah clause was reiterated by Farrukhsiyar. So be it Shah Shuja or be it Farrukhsiyar, the British were very well entrenched in Bengal politics. Further, by 1698, 1700, they had developed Calcutta by adding three villages together, and also had a settlement in the form of Fort Saint, or rather Fort William. Fort William. So they are very well placed in this sector, very well placed in this sector. And when it comes to the trade of the British, Bengal was the most prosperous province. 80% of all trade in the east used to happen via Hooghly, and Bengal land revenue was also very significant, very high and significant. So while the Carnatic sector may have been not very, very important in this story, except for the French and the English rivalry, Bengal is like a prized possession. Bengal is like a prized possession. And controlling Bengal basically gives you the most prosperous province in India at this point of time. And in our story, it is the richest province. 60% of all British imports were in Bengal itself and Bengali goods. And the Nawab, as of right now, controls a very big area in the name of Bengal, which today controls West Bengal, Bihar, Orissa, and even the whole of Bangladesh and certain parts of UP. It's a very big province. Very big province. And as I told you, Calcutta had been established in 1698. And the fact is, since 1651, the English warehouse in Hooghly had been very, very prosperous. So I cannot emphasize enough how important this province is for the Nawab, for India, and for the British generally. Now comes into our context Sirajudaulah, Jharkhand also, which is basically Bihar, Jharkhand. Sirajudaulah. And Alivardi Khan had given Sirajudaulah the power to come in 1756. He was succeeded by Sirajudaulah in 1756. But you need to understand one thing very clearly, that between Alivardi Khan coming to power and Sirajudaulah taking control, the bankers, merchants did not like the family of Alivardi Khan and its politics. Why? Because if you remember, bankers and merchants played a very crucial role in power politics. And two such personalities were Jagat Seth and Omi or Amir Chand, a Marwadi banker and a merchant. Now, Alivardi Khan actually did not like Jagat Seth. Alivardi Khan wanted to undercut Jagat Seth's power in Bengal politics. And therefore, when Sirajudaulah came to power, Sirajudaulah was not liked by these two people. Was not liked by these two people because Sirajudaulah was the grandson of Alivardi Khan. So one thing is very clear, that the merchants and the bankers are frustrated. Bengal trade and economy needs these bankers and these merchants. But Alivardi Khan was not very, very pro banker and merchant type personality. Which is a good thing or a bad thing? Which is a good thing or a bad thing? It's in a way good thing. Because the more you keep people away from politics, the more you become an independent ruler. If bankers and merchants play a very important role in your power politics, who will the king work for? The people or the banker or merchants? Tell me. Who will they work for? They will work for the bankers and merchants. Very good. So in a way, Alivardi Khan was doing this for the people. So I have right now established in front of you that Sirajudaulah is not liked by Jagat Seth and Umir Amir Chand. This is the first point. Second point is between 1717 and 1756. The English had indiscriminately used their power and had become a problem for the Nawabs. Why? Because they are over exploiting their position and power given under 1717 Farman. This again should not come as a surprise to us. Very standard thing. Now, in 1756, both Siraj and Alivardi personally neither liked the British. Neither of them liked the British because of the fact that they are leaking the economy. And as it is, the French are also present, had presence in a place called, if you live in Calcutta, you would or have ever been to Calcutta, it's called Chandranagar. Had presence in Chandranagar. And very simply, English were becoming a problem. So I have established two things. Siraj ud Dawla not liked by bankers and merchants, and British are a problem for the Nawabs and over exploiting the Farmans. Are we clear with regards to these 2 points? Three rulers changed, but Jagat Seth and Omi Amir Chand were still there. Yes, that is how bankers and merchants work. Why Siraj not liked by bankers? Because he wanted to remove Jagat Seth from the picture. Jagat Seth is like the Sayyid brothers. Jagat Seth and Omi Amir Chand, think of it like that, they are kingmakers. As a ruler, would you like to always be bugged by these people? You would want to be an independent ruler. But your independence cannot be done or is contingent on the fact that bankers and merchants are always bugging or are all basically the real power center. And Alivardi Khan and Sirajuddaula both did not like that. They wanted their own independence. They wanted their own space, which was basically not there under Aba Jagat Seth on Omir Chand Amir Chand. Are we clear? Because now I will start the story of Bengal. I need your assertion. Okay. Now, the year is 1756. Can anybody tell me what started in 1756? What started in 1756? Very good. There are two things which start together: 7 Years' War and the Third Carnatic War. 1756. You have the Hooghly and you have on both sides of the Hooghly one a French factory and the other which is the English. This is the Hooghly River. We have the English factory or Fort William. No, the bankers and merchants don't have their own army, obviously not, but they have influence over the army. Money does everything. Now, what happens is that the 7 Year War has started. So the French and the English had already started to fight in the Carnatic sector. So what we call as English and the French do is that in Bengal, without asking Sirajuddaula, they start to fortify their settlement. They start to fortify their settlement. And this is basically not allowed if you do not have the permission of the Nawab. If you do not have the permission of the Nawab. So both have started, both English and French, anticipating a war between them in Bengal due to 7 years war, they start to fortify without permission of Siraj ud Dawla. Now what happens is that Siraj ud Dawla gets to know that there is fortification and there is also military establishment being in a way increased in both these forts. So Sirajudaulah says to both of these powers, stop the fortification. Stop the fortification. That you are illegally doing this. You need to stop fortification. Because you have not taken my permission, and he is basically already very angry with the British, and he does not want the European powers to become military powers in his own territory. So he's asked them to stop fortification. Very ominously, French agree to stop fortification, but the English do not stop fortification process. And this will lead to, in 1756, a major moment in which Sirajudaulah will move to Calcutta, or rather march to Calcutta, and seize Fort William. He will say that you are not complying with me. Non-compliance of my orders. So he said to each and every Britisher, whichever ship you see, you leave on it, because if you will remain, I will literally kill you. So he expels the English out of Fort William. And because the military establishment at this point of time in Fort William was not a lot, Sirajudaulah has now initiated a very dangerous thing. Does anybody have any issue until this point? Anybody has any issue till this point? Yes, no? No? Now, did he take help from French? No. He's powerful enough. Now via the siege of Fort William, Sirajudaulah will do a major mistake. In siege of Fort William, in Fort William itself, there used to be a small dungeon inside the fort, basically a very small room. It was in the basement. With only one window. And now most of the Britishers left. Most of these Britishers left, but such close to 200 to 500 were left. were left. And according to the British, remember, Siraj's officers lock the remaining men and women, allegedly 200 to 500, in this small room, in the small confined room. Now, if there is only one ventilation spot and more people than space, what is going to happen? What is going to happen? Yes, you will suffocate. So basically, it is believed that in the night they kept 200 to 500 Britishers, and in the morning 100 to 150 Britishers died of suffocation, and this is called the black hole incident. I don't tend to call it tragedy because Britishers dying for me is not a tragedy. So I call it a black hole incident. So they call it the black hole tragedy. It is a black hole incident. We don't know the exact number. We don't know if it really happened. We don't know if this was a made up concept. And we don't know how many people actually died. All have been given by the Britishers. Now, this black hole incident has now made major news in England. And basically, the East India Company will use this incident to justify and also demonize Sirajuddaulah. And the British public opinion in England, they wanted revenge. They wanted revenge. And in this context, June of 1756, Robert Clive is going to come to Calcutta, and Clive will have a battle with Sirajuddaulah. And what will happen is that Clive will win, and in the Treaty of Ali Nagar, Siraj was made to return Fort William and compensate the British. So you can see that the first excursion, the British turn out to be on the victory side after the black hole incident. And black hole incident was basically used to justify military support and military action. So see, the officials of the company had rampantly misused their trade privileges. 1756, 23-year-old grandson Sirajuddaulah has come to power. Suspicious of large profits made by the European companies, he asked them to have a certain presence which is basically not that engrossed into the politics and the economy. And he said that I will only give you the privileges which Murshid Quli Khan used to give. But when the British and the French started improving their fortifications, in anticipation of another war between them because of the 7 Years' War, he immediately ordered them to stop their activities as they had not done this without permission. The French agreed, but the English didn't. When the British refused to cease their constructions, the Nawab, with 3,000 men, surrounded the fort and factory in Kasim Bazar and in Calcutta and took everybody who was there as prisoners. The city was occupied on 16 June by Siraj, and Fort William was surrendered after a brief siege on 20th June in 1756. The prisoners were captured and they were kept in a small confined space or a dungeon in Fort William, and that is called the Black Hole Incident. Black Hole Incident, very simply, will make the British angry, and British were now talking about how careless Nawab was. Siraj was now made into a monster, and the East India Company could now act militarily, and the British public were behind them. What is going to happen is that the troops under Clive was initially meant to oust the French from the Deccan, were sent to Bengal, and in 1757 February, Robert Clive arrived with a strong naval force, and he was able to defeat Sirajuddaula. And the Treaty of Ali Nagar, English were restored to their former privileges, fortifications were allowed, and compensation for what the losses the English had suffered. Till this point, are we clear with regards to what is the first basic round of incidents which have happened? Yes? Yes, Gokul, you can write incident, tragedy, totally your call. Now, are we clear? Yes, sir. Okay, now to be very honest, by defeating Siraj once, is the issue killed? After Clive came, fought with Siraj was defeated, Treaty of Ali Nagar. You don't have to write a conclusion in this. A big story conclude ki nahi hai. It's not concluded. Now, this was not the Battle of Plassey. This was just the Battle of Ali Nagar. Has the issue been killed? If Sirajuddaula has been defeated in the the Battle of Ali Nagar, will Sirajuddaula sit silently against the British? No. And the same Clive thought. Clive knew that Sirajuddaula needs to be removed, and a permanent solution would be only defeating Siraj properly and removing him. And he could see that the English interest in Bengal is now not protected. But Clive did not know how to do it, because Clive had a very strong navy, but not a very strong army presence at this point of time in Bengal. And very mysteriously and unfortunately for India, Clive will receive a message from Jagat Seth and Omi or Amir Chand that they want to interact with Robert Clive. Clive had no idea about the internal politics of the Bengal Nawabi. He had no idea what was the internal politics generally. But Jagat Seth and Omin and Amir Chand said that we like the British. British are giving us a lot of what we call as payment or opportunity. They bring us a lot of business in that regard. And we want Sirajuddaula gone. We want Sirajuddaula gone. So Clive said, how can we remove Sirajuddaula? Jagat Seth and Amir Chand said, if we tell you give us the dastak, which transfers all your privileges to us also, and you will make us the most closest of bankers of the British. Clive knew that he would never get such kind of information for free. So he said, I would make you the most important banker and merchant, and I will give you the dastak also. You trade with all privileges which the British have, free of cost. And now Clive is told about the internal politics of how Mir Jafar, his commander in chief, of army, which is Mir Bakshi. The position is called Mir Bakshi. Mir Jafar had a lot of political ambition. That he had political ambition. Along with that, Rai Durlabh, who was a treasurer, was also not very happy with Sirajudollah. Not happy. And there was also an internal power struggle which was happening between Ghasiti Begum and Kadim Khan. Kadim Khan, Mir Jafar, and Rai Durlabh. These three people were not happy with Siraj's administration, and Ghasiti Begum wanted to challenge the power of Siraj. He wanted Siraj out, wanted to become Nawab himself. And Manik Chand, again another officer of Sirajudollah, was not very keen to work for Sirajudollah. Jagat Seth and Umi Chand explained Clive this internal politics. And both of them told the British that if we are able to convince Mir Jafar and Manik Chand and Kadim Khan that we will transfer power to them, if Siraj is removed, they will maybe ready to help the British and Robert Clive. Now you tell me, would there have been any opportunity for Clive to understand this process? Even in his multiple lives, this type of information would never have been available to Clive. Clive would have never ever understood this type of politics. So basically, the list which you see here is a list of traitors, of people who basically were selling off India for mere merchant rights. And now what the plan will be made, is that on 23rd June 1757, the British, they all went against Siraj to, yes, that is the point. On 23rd June 1757, the British would challenge Sirajudollah for a war, and the place of meeting which was decided was a place called Plassey. And what was decided was that there were basically four parts to the army. One is with, or the biggest is with Mir Jafar. A small is with Sirajudollah himself. Another part was with Kadim Khan, leading these men. And the last one was with a person called Mir Madan and Mohanlal. Mir Madan, and one more which is Mohanlal. Basically, this is the way the whole army was divided. There were one, two, three, four generals, and Mir Jafar the biggest and the most powerful, and smaller armies with Kadim, Mir Madan, and Mohanlal. And what was decided was that the British will attack this contingent, and Mir Jafar, Kadim Khan would not fight in its only. So 70% of the army just withdrew and did not fight. And basically, Plassey was not won by force. Plassey was a conspiracy. Was a conspiracy. And this conspiracy, Siraj was killed and Bengal was now open for British colonialism. Basically, 30 kilometers away from Murshidabad, it was only battle in name. The battle was a mere skirmish with the already the victors and the basic, what we call as basic contours and strategies decided. Only Mir Madan and Mohanlal will fight. And very ominously, Mir Jafar, who will then be installed as the next governor or next Nawab, his son will put Sirajudaulah to death. And this is basically the Battle of Plassey for you. Plassey was not a battle, it was a conspiracy. And this meant that this conspiracy was going to, in a way, open the gates a little bit towards India getting colonized. So one thing is very clear, is very, very clear, that Plassey was not a proper battle. It was not a proper battle. It was just in name. And as soon as Sirajudaulah is killed, Mir Jafar will be appointed as the Nawab as he wanted. But what follows after the Plassey is called the loot of Bengal. Now Clive will literally loot Bengal as much as he wanted. It was a party. The company officials will literally start to loot, take anything and everything. So Mir Jafar, Jagat Seth, Omi Chand Amir Chand, Ghasiti Begum, Rai Durlabh, Kadim Khan, and Mohanlal basically sold off Bengal for mere amounts of money and certain trade privileges which they wanted. And what will start is that the English will now be given the Zamindari of 24 Parganas, which is still a very important district in Bengal. So they will be made the owners of basically the whole district itself. Mir Jafar will now become a puppet in the hands of Clive. This will now become the entry point for the British, like a snake into the Indian subcontinent. Further, the French will be made to leave Bengal because Bengal is now under Mir Jafar and the English. But more than that, the amount of money which the British took is astonishing. Because Mir Jafar was nothing but a dependent ruler of the English, Murshidabad had now become a place where the British resident, which is a British officer, used to sit. All other European powers were marginalized. They were asked to move away. Zamindari of 24 Parganas were already given. But now Robert Clive was said that he would be Subedar of Bengal. And basically, when the Nawab will say that I am the Subedar, he will ask what does the Subedar mean, and he will be appointed as the first governor of Bengal by the East India Company. The court of directors were so happy that Clive had basically opened up India for everyone. And the story is still not complete, but he had still opened up the Bengal sector for everyone. They were so happy that he was given a position of governor of Bengal. He was now going to sit in Bengal and basically have an administrative position. Personally, he received a lot of gifts from the rulers and the people. 50 lakh rupees, 50 lakh rupaya was taken as bribes by the officers. It is believed that Robert Clive was a beggar when he left for India when he was going for the Carnatic Wars. His family did not have, not even had a one loaf of bread to eat. But when he returned back from the Plassey battle, he was a zamindar in India, and with 50 lakh rupiah, the level of gold and silver, he even became later a member of the House of Lords because of that much power and money he had. Very simply, I'll not talk about Jafar and Buxar and Qasim. I'll do that after the break. What I want you to remember is that since the morning, we've discussed the three Carnatic Wars. All three Carnatic Wars was about Anglo-French rivalry, how it played out in the south. But when in the south, Anglo-French rivalry is being played out, something very dangerous was happening between 1756 and 57, which is that Bengal fortifications black hole was just a reason. Clive wanted a proper solution, much like how he had installed Muhammad Ali as the ruler of Carnatic. But Clive did not know how to solve the Bengal politics or how to enter into Bengal politics. And it is here that the traitors called Jagat Seth and Omi Amir Chand, the bankers and the merchants of Bengal, in order to be pro-British and in order to bring in more prosperity for themselves, they will sell off Siraj, and Sirajuddaula will fight a battle which was never a battle, the Battle of Plassey in 1757, and that will in turn open up Bengal for looting. 50 lakh rupees rupiah was taken away from the people of Bengal. Bengal will go into now the governorship of Robert Clive himself, and more than that, Clive will take personally a lot of bribes, zamindari of what the 24 Parganas, and now Bengal was going to become an example of how the British looted India generally. So if you can remember the point till which we have reached till now, I want to come back after the lunch break and take the story forward and talk about Buxar, and then talk about the Marathas, Mysore, and the Sikhs. House of Lords is for royal born. That is technically not true. You can buy into House of Lords. Can I take a break here? You will join with part B. But are we clear with regards to how this whole thing is set up? Does the three Carnatic Wars and Battle of Plassey, are you capable of telling someone else this Battle of Plassey? Yes? So we take a break here. We'll be back at 3:40 and we'll take the story of battles forward, Buxar, and then the three Maratha Wars. See you at 3:40. Have a good lunch. Take care.